Okay, for all the things that are done right with this game, here's one that I can't for the life of me believe someone missed. And this game tracks how much fuel you have left. So naturally, you'd think that tiny little gauge between the turn signals would be your fuel levels. Except it never moves. So there's no way to track how much fuel you have left while you're driving. And I may not know how to drive in real life, but I'm pretty sure the fuel gauge is kinda important. Today on Ancient DOS Games, we're taking a look at one of the more aesthetically unique racing games ever released, given that it's based on the teenage automobile culture of America from decades past. That game being Street Rod. Now, the funny thing about this game is that it's one of those games that looks a lot better than it plays. Which isn't to say it's a bad game, but that the main reason why it's interesting is the history that it's steeped in, and not the actual game mechanics, which are, quite frankly, pretty basic. However, this game manages to stay interesting even today because there's very few games like it on both levels. There's tons of better racing games, but most of them don't focus on the same early era of automobiles, nor do they focus on the culture surrounding them. And any games which do focus on these aspects aren't typically racing games, thus the presence of such vehicles is incidental. The game also has its place in DOS gaming history as being one of the first to offer the ability to tweak your vehicle by installing new parts, removing old parts, and tuning your engine. Ultimately though, it doesn't take very long to see most of what this game has to offer, so while it's interesting for sure, it's also short-lived given the way that it works. Jeez, there's a lot of companies involved with this one. Street Rod was originally conceived by a group known as Magic Partners, which I wasn't really able to find any info on. It was developed by two companies, PZ Karen Co. Development Group and another company called Logical Design Works, and was published through LDW's California Dreams banner in 1989. Now, the version that I happen to be playing is a 2014 re-release by MK Consultancy called Street Rod SE, which not only includes all of the extra data disc cars, but has also had its copy protection stripped out. It's a one-player racing game with support for Hercules, CGA, Tandy, EGA, and VGA graphics, running from 2 to 16 colors, and typically at 320 by 200 resolution, save for the Hercules mode. But it only supports the PC speaker for sound effects and music. As for its current release date, MK Consultancy acquired the rights to the Street Rod games in late 2012, and have since released both the original, the sequel, and the new SE version of the first game as freeware, thus they can be obtained from the new Street Rod homepage at streetrodonline.com. Plus, as you may be able to tell from that URL, the company is also working on a new game called Street Rod Online, though it's still very early in development. If you want to get a physical copy of this game for sake of collecting, well, good luck. They are extremely difficult to come across, and from what I can tell, on the rare chance you do spot one in fully boxed condition, you can expect to pay around $50 for it, regardless of whether it's the DOS, Amiga, or Commodore 64 version. Basically, if you want to play this game and not collect it, then you definitely want to stick to the free downloads that are available now. So in this game, you play the role of a teenager in 1963 on summer break from school, wanting to become the coolest kid in town. And your plan on how to achieve this is to buy cars, soup them up, and race the local teens to make a name for yourself. Not to mention catch the attention of the king, who happens to own the coolest car around. And if you can get the king to agree to a race and win against him, you'll nab his vehicle for yourself and will become the new king. The only catch is you got to pull this all off by the end of summer vacation. Otherwise, it's back to school and you won't have time to work on your cars. Now, you only start the game with $750 and no cars to your name, so naturally, the first thing you gotta do is check the paper for some used vehicles. Now, I feel the developers missed a huge chance here, as all the listings in the paper, both for cars and for auto parts, are fixed. They're the same selections with the same prices through the entire course of the game, made more odd when you realize the system in place here is clearly designed to be able to handle different listings and such. Making this content procedurally generated would have really extended the longevity of this thing, especially since there are indeed some things you simply can't find in the paper, meaning you have to obtain them in other ways. In terms of the cars available to choose from, the selection is extremely impressive, to the point where we'd be here quite a while if I had to list them all. But suffice to say, there's tons of cars you can choose from. All real vehicles from the 1930s to the 1960s. But unfortunately, there's very little in the way of performance differences between them all, save for a hidden trait which determines the weight and ultimately the maximum attainable speed of the vehicle. Now, each vehicle also looks identical from the inside when racing, though given how many working dashboards they'd have to make if this wasn't the case, it's kind of understandable, especially given the customization options later in. Actually, speaking of customization, this costs even more money, so you probably won't be doing much of it at first, though it's an important aspect later in the game, so we'll definitely get to talking about it later in the episode. Now, once you have your first car, though, you'll probably want to tank it up, since any vehicles you obtain will likely be low on gas at first. Now, once you're at the gas station, you can either pump the gas yourself or just wait, and the guy sitting outside will do it for you at twice the normal cost. Now, you might be thinking you should just pump it yourself and pocket the cash, but the game tracks your popularity in the background, and not pumping your own gas is a good way to give your popularity a small boost, since it's the cool thing to do. In order to actually put your car to use, though, you'll need to head to the local drive-in diner and look for other drivers to race. Now, each time someone pulls up, you can choose to challenge them to a drag race or a road race. Drag races go for a 3/4 mile straight line, while road races go for over a couple miles across winding roads and occasional obstacles. Now, while performing races boosts your popularity, it can also boost your wallet. Drag races can be done just for kicks, but you can also bet $10 or $50 on them. Road races, though, are much more lucrative, with bets of $25, $100, or what's referred to as pink slips, whereby whoever wins takes home the other person's car. Now, a couple things of note here. The first is that you can actually call up people you've seen before by clicking on the guy standing up by the post. Thus, if you want to challenge someone specific, you can. The other thing you can do is pop the hood on any vehicles which show up to see what kind of engine they're boasting, since you probably don't want to race against someone sporting an engine that's bigger than or has better components than yours. The actual racing aspect of this game, though, is pretty basic. You have typical driving controls, with the arrow keys affecting acceleration, braking, and turning left and right, with the space bar affecting your gear selector. With an automatic transmission, the gear selection only goes between drive and neutral. With a manual transmission, you'll change gears up if you're accelerating or not pressing the accelerator, and will change gears down if you're braking. But winning a race of any kind often comes down to two factors: how good your car is versus your opponent's car, and how well you're able to knock them around. Yeah, unlike most early racing games where hitting other vehicles would result in an instant crash, in this game, bumping other vehicles from the side is encouraged. In fact, if you don't do it, the AI will, so learning to bump your opponent off is essential to winning races early on, as well as for winning the final races against the king, since even if you have the best stuff possible, the king's car is simply way too fast to outrun with raw power alone. The game emulates a number of potential circumstances as well. For instance, you're supposedly racing on city roads even though there's never any traffic, but even so, when doing a road race with another driver, there's always a chance you'll end up with the cops chasing you. Unfortunately, there's little you can do about this when it happens, as the police vehicles are extremely fast and outrunning them is next to impossible. Though if you immediately brake when they show up, you can shave some money off of the ticket you'll get. Plus it cancels the race, so you won't win or lose any bets you made. The game also emulates a couple things many racing games don't. Firstly, you can indeed blow your engine in this game. With an automatic transmission vehicle, this can only happen if you rev up to max and neutral for too long. With a manual, however, there's a red line area on the tachometer, and if you enter that red area, you're actually perfectly okay. Yeah, normally on a vehicle, the red line indicates the estimated range, where if you rev the engine that high, it'll physically start to break down due to the whole engine system exceeding its own capacity to function. But in this game, your engine is only in danger when you reach maximum RPM and hear an extremely audible change in the sound of the engine. When that happens, just let go of the gas for a split second and you'll be back to normal. Another thing that can happen is your transmission can fall off. And while it's possible for this to happen with an automatic transmission vehicle in this game, it can only happen if you shift from neutral to drive with the accelerator held down. And even then, the chance is extremely low. With a manual transmission, however, since you're going to be shifting more often, and because you'll often be accelerating, it's much more likely to happen there. The trick is to let go of the accelerator when switching gears, and you won't run into any problems with dropping the transmission. And that's pretty much it for the basic gameplay components. The one thing I want to make note of is that while it may seem like the game only has a single course for the road races, there are actually more courses than just the first one. But I found this out while not recording footage, and once I started recording footage, I couldn't figure out how to get it to happen again. So if anyone has any info on how and why different road race courses are selected, please let me know so I can add that to the additional information section below this video on my website. One of the big draws of this game is the ability to customize your vehicle. Now, truth be told, this isn't actually as nearly as in-depth a process as it looks on the surface, as your customization options are fairly limited. But they're neat to have all the same, especially for a game of this age. Your customization options come down to changing the engine, changing the manifold on the engine, changing the carburetors on the manifold, tuning the engine timing, changing the transmission, changing the tires, removing or replacing the front and rear bumpers, chopping the roof, spraying the car a new color, and applying stickers to the sides. The engine is naturally the biggest deal in terms of getting maximum performance out of your ride. And typically speaking, the bigger the engine, the better it will perform. You also need to make sure to fit the engine with a manifold that can handle it, plus you'll also need to make sure to put carburetors on the manifold. Typically, the more expensive these parts are, the better they'll work, but certain parts won't fit with other parts. So it's often a good idea to save before you start buying stuff in case you buy something that isn't going to fit. And you also want to tune your engine following. And the timing belt can be tuned to adjust how well the vehicle accelerates in different gears. If you retard the timing, lower gears will accelerate faster, while if you advance the timing, higher gears will accelerate faster. Now, there's also a red mark to indicate the most balanced spot between the two extremes open to you. Now, while you can fiddle with the timing a little based on how you're going to be racing, it's pretty difficult to figure out where to leave your timing set to for a variety of reasons. Also, this only affects acceleration, not the maximum speed you can attain. To that end, after every race, you're given your average speed for the race so that you can determine if your timing is working out or not. Now, your timing can also get knocked out of place when you bump opponents, so make sure to check your timing routinely, just in case it's not where you want it to be. In terms of the transmission, the only thing you can do here is take off the old one and put on a new one. Though this helps to highlight one thing I really like about this game, in that it sort of emulates the feel of working on your car by having you fasten or remove bolts from the transmission and engine block using your wrench-shaped mouse cursor. Transmissions are limited to automatic, 3-speed, and 4-speed models in this game. In terms of the exterior, the tires are probably the most important thing you can replace, as racing slicks will give you far better control in corners than the other tire types. You can also remove the front and rear bumpers for a tiny boost in speed, but this will make your car easier to crash from bumping opponents, so I don't recommend it. The roof can also be chopped, making it sit lower and thus make the car more aerodynamic, giving you a little bit of a speed boost. But it takes a number of in-game days to perform this modification, so it's best to only do it to your final vehicle. As for the car's color, I'm not sure if this plays a factor in popularity or not, but adding a sticker definitely does, so make sure to apply a sticker to every car you intend to race. Your popularity affects how likely other drivers will accept your race bets, as well as how often the king will show up. So getting your popularity as high as possible is important for completing the game. Now, I do have a few tips for those of you who want to give this game a go, and my first major tip is to worry about your tires first. Out of all the customization options you have, going up to racing slicks early on will give you an unprecedented amount of cornering capability, which is going to be necessary for winning your first races. Plus, once you have a pair of slicks, you can swap them over to any new cars you get and you just put the old tires back on your old cars when you go to sell them. Now, speaking of selling your cars, my next tip is to always start with a very high offer and just go down in steps until someone starts to haggle. The game always allows you to make the same offer twice, with the second return offer being higher than the first. However, the first can fluctuate quite a bit. Basically though, if you sell a car for the exact price you offer, you definitely lowballed it and should reload your game and try for a higher price. In terms of selling parts, the prices you'll get can vary, but by so little it's often not worth worrying about. In terms of getting opponents to accept your challenges, there's this whole system of probability calculations in place for every individual driver based on what challenges they've recently done, your popularity, your ride, etc. But really, ignore all of that and just constantly select the type of challenge you want to perform. Sooner or later, someone will accept it and off you'll go. I also recommend doing nothing but pink slip races early on because quite frankly, you'll need the money. In order to race the king though, you'll need to have won a number of both drag and road races. And each time you fail against the king, you'll need to do more of these. So keep this in mind when selecting the type of races you want to do. As for the whole racing thing, you absolutely must learn how to properly bump your opponent back, because as I said earlier, if you don't, they will. And when they do it, it makes it potentially more difficult or impossible to win. Also, once you bump them back, if they happen to be faster than you, you're going to need to keep them behind you somehow. Simply keep the opponent centered in your rearview mirror and they won't be able to overtake. Or if they make the attempt and disappear from your rearview mirror, immediately try to bump them to get them back behind you. My final tip is kind of obvious, but really, make sure you save your game before you spend any money or race for a pink slip, because it's very possible to end up unable to progress forwards due to running out of money or being completely out of a car. In fact, it's even possible to go to jail in this game if you get a speeding ticket and can't afford it, though I've never actually seen this happen. Overall, Street Rod is an interesting game for sure, but it doesn't have a lot of staying power since you'll have seen pretty much everything it has to offer within a couple hours of gameplay. Plus, the final race against the king is both frustrating and difficult, and I just wasn't able to get a feel for the timing necessary to win it. Basically, this game is all about the look and less about the gameplay. And while it certainly has a stronger presentation than most racing games of its time, it just doesn't actually play as well as them. But still, considering it's freeware now, there's no reason not to give it a go, particularly if you enjoy racing games, because for those first couple hours, it's definitely enjoyable. I mean, even if a bit finicky due to its intentionally low frame rate. As for DOSBox, just leave cycle set to auto and you're good to go. The copy protection with the original game is thankfully based on color codes from a separate item included in the box. And possibly the manual, except the manual I found online was in black and white, so maybe that was for a different version of the game other than the DOS version. Just still, if you've got the original inserts, then this is a non-issue with running a physical copy. Anywho, that's all for episode 145 of Ancient DOS Games. Next week's a filler, and I think I'm finally ready to talk about modern day pinball, in terms of options for playing on a screen and options for playing the real thing, as well as gameplay strategies and general knowledge. So for those of you with even a mild curiosity about the state of pinball nowadays, or an itch to play the real thing again, make sure you stay tuned for next Saturday as I've got a lot of ground to cover and information to share.